Welcome to Chronic Conversations, the podcast that brings a voice to the stories behind chronic symptoms. I'm your host, Katherine Rose, certified integrative health practitioner, founder of Reclaimable, and soon-to-be published author. After years of battling unexplained symptoms and finally getting a diagnosis of Hashimoto's, I turned my pain into purpose. Now I help women, just like you, feel seen, heard, validated, and supported through community, coaching, and connection. Each week, I'll share insights from my own journey, proven strategies I use with clients, and conversations with fellow experts and warriors. You're not alone, and you can thrive. Now let's get into today's conversation. Welcome back to another episode of Chronic Conversations. I am really excited about today's guest. Her name is Eileen McDonald. She is a registered nurse, certified coach, biofeedback trainer, and breathwork specialist with more than 30 years of experience in well-being and resilience. And I had a conversation with her a little while before recording this episode or leading up to it. And it's just all so fascinating what stress can do to your body, which I knew some things, but others were like, wow. Anyway, back to Eileen. Let me finish telling you about her. Eileen helps high-performing women understand and work with their stress response instead of constantly pushing through it, which I'm like, yes. Through breath, nervous system awareness, and practical mind-body tools, she teaches women how to move out of chronic pressure and show up with more clarity, steadiness, and energy. And her work is all about helping women reconnect with their body, build resilience, and create a more sustainable way of living and leading. And in today's conversation, we're covering stress in many ways and how it affects our bodies and our health. And so with that, let's get into it. So for our listeners, will you tell us about yourself and how you got into what you do and just what you want everyone to know about you?
Well, thank you, Katherine, for letting me be here today.
You're welcome.
Audience, I'm so excited. So sure, it's interesting how life happens to all of us, right? And we don't always realize what path we're on until we're on that path. And so A little background about me. My background is I was a nurse for many years. I worked in critical care and pediatric, and I wound up developing an autoimmune disease that was undiagnosed for quite some time. So I was very sick, down to about 82 pounds. I had 3 small kids at home, and my physician would say, "You're a type A personality, Eileen. Just try to do everything." And I'm saying, okay, well, if that's true, that's fine, but this has been going on for quite some time. And I need to figure out what it is. And not fault of his own, but I felt dismissed at that time. So I really feel blessed that a female doctor came in. Nothing about male doctors. I think they're wonderful. But what she was able to do, I think, was look at me as a whole and say, yes, you might be, working, have a family, all of these aspirations, and right, the big A and D word.
Yeah.
What's going on? Like, what's going on with you? Because this is not irritable bowel. This is something deeper, and we need to figure it out.
Yeah.
So she did. She put me on the right track. I was diagnosed over 30 years ago with celiac disease. Back then, it really wasn't a cool thing to say. People didn't know what that was. They're like, how do you spell that? What is that? Yeah. You're allergic to wheat? What? And really trying to explain to people what an autoimmune disease is, is I think it's a little broader now. We know so much more now than we did 30 years ago. But the journey back then was quite interesting, because back then everyone thought I had anorexia, because that was like the cool, that was on every TV show, every newscast. And
you weren't absorbing anything.
I wasn't absorbing anything. And so by the end, I'm like, well, maybe I did, what do you don't know at that point. And so being diagnosed and having diagnosis was wonderful. And saying that there's no cure for it was like, okay, what do you do? Got to figure it out.
Yeah.
So as you can say, right, I'm here 30 years later. And
so thankful you are.
Thank you. But what I really learned about myself, I felt that, okay, I have to go on a journey of figuring out what is it that my body was doing? Why was it rejecting itself, so to speak? Why was it eating itself, right? Yes, it's physical, but what is their emotional component to it, if there is one? And I was into holistic anyway, into holistic coaching at that point a little, and really understanding the body as a whole. And I really delved into understanding stress, how stress, the physical aspects of stress, that stress isn't in our head, that stress is in our body. And when we can I think we use the word stress so easy, and it's just one of these words, oh, I'm stressed out. Oh, the stress level today was, and we're telling our body what state we need to be in constantly, in that I'm busy, I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed. And so that's one way of our body saying, okay, well, I need to take care of itself. Well, if I'm stressed, what do I have to do? My body's got to get kicked into gear. We need to release some of these hormones. We need to be able to take care of itself. And so when I was learning about, and I was a nurse, I knew a little about stress. I knew the nervous system, but I didn't put it all together until I had to go through my journey, really understanding the brain, how the brain works, how the emotional centers work, how the body feeds the signals to the brain. And so if we're tense and we're constantly bracing ourselves, that's sending the signal to our brain that we're in a difficult situation, or we need to handle it. So we get flooded with stress hormones. And I didn't want to develop another autoimmune disease. It's so common to develop more than one.
It is.
So my deep dive was really wanting people to understand the physiology and the biology of stress. So then it takes away the critical aspect. When we talk about stress, people go, well, she can't handle stress well, or somebody can't it's a personality flaw, right? It's not that it's a physiologic thing, and it is about mindset, but it's also about body set, spirit set, all of those things. So that's where I took my deep dive and really explored and learned everything I could about the brain, neuroscience, the physiology. And that's how I wound up getting into understanding more about breath work, heart rate variability, different things that we can start to address in our everyday that can keep us in a healthier state.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. And I am fascinated with stress, not that I like it, but what it does to the body and how it can keep us sick if we don't address it. Yeah.
I always tell people you want to dance with the mess of stress in a different way, because we have it, or we're going to have pressures all of the time. It's life. So how can we dance with those stressors and not always just feel like we're tripping over ourselves? It affects every aspect, right? The psychological, the physical, the mental, the spiritual, the relationships, all of those.
Y'all, real quick, before we jump back into today's episode, I want to take a minute to talk to you, especially if anything you've heard so far has felt a little too familiar. If you've ever felt dismissed, misunderstood, or like you're navigating your health completely on your own, I created something for you. And it's called the Kaya Collective. Kaya stands for Come As You Are. Don't worry, it's not another program or place just to get more information. It's a space where you don't have to explain your symptoms, prove your pain, or push through to just keep up. Inside the Kaya Collective, you'll find real conversations, support from women who actually get it, and tools to help you actually understand what your body is trying to tell you, but without the overwhelm. It's for women who are doing all the right things, but still don't feel right. The woman who's tired of surface level answers and ready for something deeper, and the woman who just wants to feel seen, heard, and supported. Again, if that sounds like you, I would love to have you inside. You can learn more at the link in the show notes, and I'd love to see you there. All right, let's get back into today's episode. Yeah, absolutely. And I was just thinking of even back to childhood, if developed some coping mechanisms in stressful situations. And I'm not saying this, I'm asking this. And we learned that, and that's how we dealt with the stress. Do you agree that it's hard to kind of like flip the switch off, I guess, in those and learn how to do it in a healthier way if what we learned, those coping mechanisms weren't the best? I mean, they served their purpose when we were younger, but to somehow learn healthier ways.
I always tell people that's what happens a lot of times as kids. We develop coping skills, right? And they work at the time. But as we grow and we become adults, those coping skills don't no longer serve us. And I think the awareness is one thing. We need to be aware of the coping skills. So I tell people you have to put your own detective hat on. You're the only one that knows you and knows your relationships and knows your responses. And many people are surprised to find out they think one thing might be their trigger. And it really is something else because we become adaptive to certain ways of living, right? It's not our natural way, but becomes our normal.
Can you think of an example?
So it's almost, I'm going to do a simple one, sleep. People say, I don't sleep well. I just don't sleep well. And they just constantly say that day after day, week after week, month after month. They know they don't sleep well. And they don't take that deeper dive in understanding, okay, what is it? What is it? My sleep routine? Is it that I'm drinking caffeine? Is it that, I've not being able to regulate myself during the day? So what is that? Because when we don't sleep, we're not repairing. So we're borrowing from the next day's energy, so to speak, right? So I have some people when they sleep or they practice their sleep hygiene, it can be as simple as that. Get rid of the phone and all of that stuff before you go to bed.
Falling asleep to TV.
Exactly. My mother, I hope one won't listen to this, but she watches the TV and it's on all night. I mean, literally. That's how and it's been like that since I've been young. I mean, she's always, that's her. I don't believe she's getting deep sleep, but
it's her thing.
It's her thing. But I think we need to look at that. Breath is another one that I really focus on a lot. And I think we kind of touched on that, is that when we've developed habits. So just say, I use an example that if you're in school and your teacher's staring at you while you're taking a test, or she's walking up and down, or he's walking up and down, we hold our breath because we get nervous. And so we start to do that. And then that can transfer into adulthood with authority, whether it's police, whether it's your boss, whatever that authority figure is. And we start holding our breath and dysregulating our breath. And so then that puts us more in a, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode. And so that's a coping skill that's no longer helpful. And it really affects our interaction with that person.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Parental figure, even.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anybody that we see in that authority figure, and as children, our adults we trust them, right? They're our support system. They're that safety. And if for some reason we've learned to navigate some of their stressors because we want to navigate and help them, then we take that on. We don't even realize it. So those are the ones that when we start to dive deep into understanding, when I say deep, really understanding and uncover, really, and not be complacent with, okay, you know what, this isn't working for me. I'm feeling tired, exhausted. Now it's affecting my health. We need to kind of look at things a little bit differently. Sometimes looking in the mirror is a little scary for people, to really start to uncover things.
Sure.
And I always say, all of this is not for the faint of heart. We need to, but when you get to the other side and when you start to, it's just like anything else, right? Some people have issues when they don't want to open a bill when they get it because they start to have heart palpitations, and they open the bill and it's a check, but they would never imagine it was a check, refund. Yeah. They would think it was a bill. So, it's those type of situations, it's the daily situations that keep us activated. And, it's the big stresses in life that do compound, but it's our daily life that's really the one that compounds it over and over and over, and we keep adding to it. So if we can start to unravel that a little and start to look at it with some curiosity and not as much fear, then we get to see things a little more clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go back to breath.
Okay.
But first, like the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. I know most of us know fight or flight, and that's it's kind of like fight or flight, rest and digest. But there are others.
Yes.
Can you explain a little bit more about like freeze and fawn, and if there are any others along with like rest and digest on that And
yeah. So, it's interesting because, years ago it was just fight or flight, right? People knew that you were going to protect yourself by fighting or getting the heck out of Dodge, right? Like you're just not, and that's the defense mechanism was. But what they found out over years of research is that the freeze one, like literally we get paralyzed and we can't answer. So if you're in a conversation that's stirring some triggers or, you're reliving something, you literally freeze and you cannot defend yourself. You can't answer back. I don't know. I hear this so often. Oh, that after I had that conversation, I should have said this, because everything, all of those thoughts come flooding through when the nervous system settles. But when that nervous system, they didn't have any thoughts to explain themselves. So they do that freeze and literally that paralyzation. We don't move forward. And that could be in work, it could be in relationships, it can be in whatever way that shows up.
Yeah.
And then the fawn one is appeasing. Like I use that. So for many people, they've learned to appease people, keep everybody at peace. Yes. Keeping everything at bay. So, their emotions don't. So you find children, if they've grown up in a household when they're the peacekeeper, sometimes that is their defense that's one of their stress responses. When they get older, they are people pleaser, which we don't look at as something negative sometimes, because that's all we've always been, the people pleaser, or the, we want to keep peace. We don't want anybody to get frazzled. We want everybody to keep, their, but we start thinking that we can control the situation by being the peacekeeper. And in reality, that only goes so far because we're not responsible for other people. And then when you get to an adult and that doesn't work anymore, there's that sense of, what's going on? And you start to want to control things that are outside of our realm instead of looking at what we can control in our realm.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I've always heard those. I didn't know freeze was, I knew it was kind of literal, but that's helpful. And then fawn, it sounds exactly like what it sounds like.
Yeah. And with the freeze, sometimes that's procrastination in things because we can't move forward, with what we want to do, whatever it is in our business, if our stress response is that activated. So it shows up in other, in all areas of our life.
Yeah. So interesting. Back to breathing.
Yes.
Just explain to us, I guess. I know we all hear, like, take a breath. I've said on here on the podcast numerous times how I used to set a timer like 3 times a day to remind myself to take 3 deep breaths or a breath, and how I need to go back to that, but I haven't. And
yet.
Being honest too.
Yeah.
And what can that do for our bodies? I know it's something so easy and it can switch us from sympathetic to parasympathetic quickly, but I'll let you explain what it's doing to our body and how quick and easy it is and how beneficial it is to us.
Yeah. And I just want to say, you're so right? Being honest is so important when we're talking to people, because we're all human. And no matter who you are, we're not going to do everything 100% correct or perfect.
No perfection over here.
And sometimes we do a plan for a while, and then for something it chips, and then we get off of it. And so I want to, really give you kudos for sharing that with your audience, because I think that's so important for all of us to show up real. Because
I agree.
I think that's so important. So I'll just go the basics with the breath to start with. So people, if they're not familiar, because there's not many people, know that breath is automatic, but they don't realize that we have control over the breath until we start doing the deep breathing. So when we inhale, most people inhale through their nose, which, that's very common. If people inhale through their mouth, there might be an obstruction in the nose. So, there's different ways. So we inhale oxygen and we exhale carbon dioxide. And that is really one of the important aspects of our, what we call breathing chemistry. Most of us have enough oxygen going through our body. We don't have low oxygen levels. But what happens is when we're anxious, overwhelmed, in that stress, fight or flight state, we have a tendency of going to short, shallow breathing, holding our breath. In that mode, our carbon dioxide level gets too low. And that, when it gets too low, it literally tightens all our vessels and puts us deeper into that fight, flight, freeze mode. And so you hear people say, there's so many different breathing techniques, which I'm not opposed to, but some people struggle with even trying those. I was doing a talk years ago. There was a yoga instructor who was a health coach, and I did a very simple exercise that I'll do with you in a minute, and she literally had a panic attack. So breath work isn't as benign as we think it is, depending on how your system is regulated and what your triggers are.
Yeah.
So when we inhale, our natural inhale, you just take your natural breath now, just kind of roll your shoulders and just take an inhale. And do you notice when you take another one, when you inhale, do you have a natural instinct to exhale through your nose or your mouth?
I was really aware. So I've learned over time to do it in my nose and out my nose.
Yes.
I don't know if
there's no right or wrong with that, as long as it feels comfortable, and that could be your natural way.
And that feels good to me.
And that's what we get people to do eventually, is I really do want, that's our natural flow, in through the nose and out through the nose. In through the nose and out through the nose. When we use the mouth, so when we inhale, our heart rate elevates. It activates our nervous system. We go into, and when we exhale, our heart rate goes down and we access that calmest state.
Okay.
And so when we're inhaling, when you're working out, or people, if you notice that panic breathing, they do that, right? So when they do that, that dysregulates. That's not a calming breath. That's very much, it activates the nervous system. So when we inhale through our nose and we have a longer exhale, that activates that nervous system, or the parasympathetic, as we talk it, right? And so right now there's a breathing technique called the 4-7-8. So you inhale for 4, you hold for 7, and then you exhale through your mouth slowly for 8. The problem is some people have a hard time holding for 7. So, and that causes that activation and a stress response.
I could see that.
So I have people just inhale, just take a nice full inhale if you can through your nose. And then when you're ready, exhale through your nose, just like whistling. Do another one. When you exhale through your mouth, you can exhale, feel like you have control of the exhale sometimes, so you can make it slower. Where sometimes you have to learn to do that with your nose. So a lot of people practice that. Inhale through your nose, hold, and then exhale. Now that exhale, it's like blowing out candles, right? You smell it, in vision, you can smell a flower as the inhale, because sometimes when we're smelling a flower, we take that longer inhale. And then at the top of that, you can exhale like you're blowing out a candle, and practice that. I do that more than I do the numbers. The numbers sometimes for people are great. They can follow that. They like the structure. Other people get confused, and it causes them more anxiety.
Yes, I could see that too.
So that type of breathing technique actually gives that nervous system a little bit of a break. So we're elevating the heart rate, and then we're actually decreasing the heart rate. We're accessing that parasympathetic part of our nervous system. And the goal for me for breathing is for people to understand that where they start to switch up their breathing. So when I have people observe their breath for a week, people go, "What? Observe for a week?" But I want you to notice, in the morning before you get out of bed, what is your breath like? What is it like when you're sipping your tea or your coffee? What is that like? Or what is it like when you're on a phone call, a stressful phone call? What is it like in the middle of the day when you're feeling exhausted and you feel like you have no resources left? Or at night? What are the triggers that shift that? Because once we start to see that, we see patterns. And then once we see a pattern, then we can start to put that detective hat on a little bit deeper and find out what those triggers are. Because breathing is a behavior. So it's a coping skill, just like any other coping skill. And if we learn unhealthy coping skills, that is what keeps us activated. So when I said about, if you're a kid sitting there, or it could be that your parents are having an argument, or, whatever it is in your home when you're younger, you hold your breath, you're waiting for that next shoe to drop, you're bracing your body. And that becomes constant, that bracing, and that becomes normal for people. until
Oh,
they
yes.
start to understand. One of the things that I think is important with breath is posture. People
Yep.
close themselves off when they're in a fearful state or in an unsecure state, right? They don't feel safe. So what they do is, not everybody that does this is shutting themselves off. Some people are cold, but it's a natural response sometimes to protect yourself. So you roll your shoulders, you make yourself smaller because you don't want to be seen, or you don't want to be, be the one that's getting picked on, or whatever that is. But these are the body's unconscious states that we develop. And so if we can open our chest, I have people like, if you close your chest off like this, take 3 or 4 breaths, just close your shoulders in and just notice if there's constriction in the chest.
Yeah, it can't possibly
Right. And so now we open and allow that breath to come in and really expand.
So much better.
And so, but so often during the day, and it could be not even an emotional component to it. It could be that we're on the computer all day long and we're shutting ourselves off. So when we do some breath exploration, it's really understanding, the posture, where we're at, and why are we closing ourselves off? It might just be for no emotional reason. It could be just that it's a habit, or it is related to that. So we get a little bit deeper in understanding that for people who want to dive deep into that. But for the posture, I think is so important for people to really notice that, and notice your breathing when you're standing, when you're sitting, and when you're lying down.
Yep.
We activate our diaphragm when we're lying down, but sometimes we constrict that diaphragm when we're sitting or standing up.
Yeah. I am a shallow breather for sure. And I'm like, I'm going to observe my breath for the rest of the week, however long. And I think it was yesterday in the car, like I took a deep breath just because I needed it. And my daughter was like, why'd you just like take a deep breath? It was noticeable. And I was like, because I needed it. And not for any specific reason or somebody's action. It's just because my body physically needed it, because I hadn't had one all day probably, which is not great.
Well, and it's really interesting that you say that your daughter noticed that, right? Because you notice people sighing a lot. If you notice people who sigh, or, they really let out that exhale, that forceful, it's their body's regulating the chemistry in their body. So there's the mechanics of our breathing, and then there's the chemistry of our breathing. And the body is so smart, it's so intelligent when we give it what it needs, and that it's sighing for a reason. It's sighing because it needs that release, right?
It did.
Yes. And it shifts everything in us. There was a situation years ago that I was part of, and there was people at the table, and we would meet regularly once a week, and one person would sigh and the other person would get so agitated because they thought they were disinterested. They thought they were annoyed. They thought that they were bored. And so they put this whole narrative about what this person was because she was sighing. And in reality, come to find out years later, I started working with her. It was her breathing chemistry was off. Like she was short, shallow breathing, holding her breath. And once we regulated that, it was that the sighing didn't happen as often.
And she was unaware, probably.
No, she had no idea. I said this at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and one of the women said, I think you might have just saved my marriage, because my husband sighs all the time and I get so ticked off at him because I think he's not listening, or he's annoyed, or he's not, And she goes, I think that's I'm glad I know that, because people do take it personally when you're around people.
Yes, I've been around someone that was taking it personally, and I didn't even realize I was doing it. I think I do now, but I didn't then.
So the breath gives us so much information. It not only connects the brain and the body, really together. Would you do any type of meditation or mindfulness?
Currently, no, but I have.
So many people struggle with meditation and mindfulness or yoga. They do struggle with that because of the breath. And many times what you find is that they've probably learned some unhealthy breathing habits, and that they are breathing from the chest, because when you're in certain poses for yoga, you're stretching that body, you're stretching that diaphragm, and that's uncomfortable. The diaphragm is the muscle, right? And it goes all around. It's 360. So when people say do belly breathing, a lot of times if they're not aware, they just push the belly out.
Yeah.
And not, but what I encourage people to do is, and it helps when they're lying down or if they're standing up and someone's holding their sides, if you can envision that, like hold their sides and take them to take a nice full breath. When they inhale, you want those ribs to expand. And on the exhale, you want to come down because you want that whole muscle to be worked. And I always say a little fact that people are probably not familiar with is that the diaphragm, if we're not utilizing that, it's not massaging the stomach and those internal organs.
You told me that before. I was like, who did I hear that from? And I was going to ask you about that next.
Yes. So think about all the digestive issues we have these days, all of reflux and all that. It could be, not that it's just the breathing, that could be other things too, but I really do think that if we can start to really get familiar with the diaphragm and expand the diaphragm and start to get it back to what it's supposed to do, then that helps with all of those organs that are right underneath that starts to massage them.
And that's what helps you digest your food. And that's why we're told to take a few breaths before we eat and not just eat over the sink or watching TV or in a rush. Of course, sometimes we can't help it, but.
Right. And if, yes, because I had kids in sports. We were always in the car and they, we were running to where
shovel
they need to be. Absolutely. But it's the awareness. The more aware we are, then we can course correct, at the end and just to make it a little bit easier on our bodies. Because as you know, a chronic illness, any area where we could improve and just give it a little support, it really benefits. I tell people you could eat right, you can exercise, you could take your supplements, you could do all your mindfulness and your mindset work. But if you're not breathing in a healthy way, all of that is not sustainable. It's not going to do what it really needs to do. And
so true.
Yeah. Years ago, when I started talking about breathing, my husband actually laughs at me. He's like, okay, you went back to school to learn how to breathe.
Yes, I did.
I said, yes, I did. He said, okay. Because at that point I was doing a lot of learning. And he said, you're learning how to think, you're learning how to breathe, you're learning how to communicate. I'm like, yes, you learned all of these things.
Yeah, there's so much more depth to it.
There is. You know, I did that even with parenting. I remember my kids were little and I took a parenting class and I know I got grief from a couple of people like, really? You're taking a parenting class? I'm like, yes, there are things I don't know. And we didn't believe in spanking and all that kind of stuff, and so you still have kids that, act up. So you're like, okay, how can I do this in a way that, is benefiting both of us, that, I'm not frustrated and agitated and want to just go, scream, that's not teaching them, that's not teaching them the way to respond.
Yeah, that was good for you for taking that class too.
It helped.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah, it's sometimes we get, not that taking a class is desperate, but
no,
for sure with kids and behaviors and things like that. We'll do anything.
Yeah. Well, and I think now there's so much great information out there about really understanding the regulation of nervous system too, right? That when we can regulate our nervous system and we stay in that state of calm, then that, we're setting that environment, we're setting that space that, that behavior, is not necessarily, I'm not going to feed into that and let's kind of talk about this or, give it that time. And so I remember saying to my son, if he asked me something, I'm like, you know what? I don't have an answer right now. You have to give me, I can't say yes, I can't say no. Right now, I don't know. But if you ask,
that's a good response.
If you ask again and again and again, it's going to be no.
Yeah.
So there's a couple things I need to figure out. I need to make some phone calls. I need to understand this and I will let you know. But right now, you have to give me that space because if you say, why not? Why can't I? I'm going to say no and you're not going to like that answer.
Yes.
But it's difficult, working and families and raising kids, they're busy and their resources, they get tired and hungry and irritable.
They do too.
Right? We're human.
We are human. That's right. I have in my notes about, and this will be helpful for listeners too. I think this is probably unique to each person, but learn to recognize early stress signals.
Yes.
in your body and like breathe before it completely takes over, or maybe it's not just breathe. Are there common signals, or I guess, or does everybody kind of have, is it specific to the person?
It's a little of both.
Oh,
I think it is
okay.
specific to the person. I think we start to know our responses, but I always tell people a couple things. Tension in your body is definitely one of them. We become accustomed to walking around with our shoulders up to our ears. And
I mean, that's me.
right, our back is all like twisted. I remember, going to the massage many years ago, and she's like, "You have a cement back." I'm like, "I do." She's like,
Oh my
"Yes."
gosh.
And so I was holding all my tension in my back,
Yes.
and I had no awareness until I started getting massages, and then I have the more flexibility in that. What I recommend for people is just several times a day, squeeze your shoulders up. If you don't have any neck issues, squeeze your shoulders up and release. Up and release, because we start to brace ourselves when we're in fear or uncomfortable or uncertain. And that's the one thing that we can start to identify is that muscle tension. It's easy to recognize. It's not difficult to do. You can go in the restroom and squeeze your shoulders and, shake your hands out, move your body during the course of the day. Literally, that's why movement is so important, but noticing the tension, but you won't notice the tension until it's released. Does that make sense?
So, absolutely.
Yeah. So if you can, in the beginning of the day, you probably don't have much, but, by lunchtime, if anybody takes lunch or a walk or a bathroom break, I always like to apply a habit with a habit, so if you're going to the restroom, every time you go, squeeze your shoulders and release them, roll them back, roll them forward, shake them out, because that's one of the first signs people will notice once they start paying attention.
Interesting.
Is that muscle tension.
That makes sense. And I had a similar experience. I don't get many massages, but recently I was like, I've got to do something on top of, I don't know, what I try to do every now and then. And she was like, "So do you do any," I don't know the name of the yoga. I wrote it down. I don't have it right here, but the one that just focuses on, I think, breath. She was like, "Your body's covered in tension," which of course also doesn't really help to hear it sometimes too. She didn't mean in any negative way or bad way. She wanted me to know so I could do something about it. And I have a lot going on right now, and all good positive things, but even those can add a boatload of stress to you and your body. But anyway, I was gonna just relate that story to yours too.
And it's true, yes. And I think it really is important for us to notice. I would tell people, I know it's expensive and, but if you could somehow in your budget once a month, even if it's a 30-minute massage just for the shoulders, not a whole body massage, but the shoulders and the arms, you'd be surprised of the people that have done that. It really makes a change because they start to notice that little bit of gripping, that little bit of tension. And then you can do that release so you don't get into that, what do I want to say, the hamster wheel or the domino effect of where the stress comes in. The other thing is people hold their breath. I mean, that is definitely one of the things they do because several reasons. Might sound strange to some people, but if you think about it, if there's so much turmoil or chaos outside of in our lives, why would our body breathe that in? Like we breathe in air for nourishment. But if there's all that stress out there, why our body just resists that naturally so we don't take it all in. And so you notice your breath when you're feeling tension and don't shift it right away. Don't go straight to a calming breath or relaxation breath. I really want people to identify where is the breath. Take a couple of breaths in that state. Does the air get stuck in your throat? Does it get stuck in your chest? Does it get stuck in your gut? Because once we start to do that, we start to notice it. I had a client, she was a school teacher. She was very funny. She loved her kindergartners. She was great. And she couldn't do parent-teacher conference. It caused so much anxiety in her. Literally, it stirred her up. So she would have a picture of her family on her screen.
Yeah.
Because she said she would get so activated and she'd get into that fight mode that she just wanted to she goes, I could really curse out those parents. And they did nothing wrong. It wasn't the parent. It was her having to, interact with the parents.
Sure.
And what she noticed after doing some work and understanding breathing is she felt her belly do a flip-flop. before the cascade of events happened. And once she felt that flip-flop, she was able to regulate herself and ground herself in that.
She recognized.
So she recognized that. So it is the posture, it's your breathing. It's actually and this you have to start being truthful with yourself. Take an inventory of how do you respond when you're in fight, flight, fear, or fawn mode? What are those characteristics? How do I behave?
Yeah.
And some people realize, well, that's who I am. I'm whatever. I'm a red in the color thing. So I get, hot. I'm like, well, that could be true.
Well,
and
yeah.
and you've learned to be that because you've had to protect yourself in many ways. So how do you show up? And you might be thinking that you're defending yourself and you're protecting yourself in certain ways. And that's true. I just want to know, how do you think that is? And what would it be if you didn't have to be in that defensive mode? If you could be in that calm mode, cool mode, collective mode, So getting people to relate to what behavior shifts they are, do they shut themselves off from people? Do they become, antisocial? What is it that works for them? Because once they understand how they respond, then they can start shifting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. And something that you said reminded me of your environment or what you're surrounding with if you're surrounded by chaos. And I know you could have been referencing even like the world or like having the news on, or your circumstances within the household or things like that. But it's hard to heal. You can't heal in the same environment that made you sick. It's hard to. It's not impossible. But whether that's mold in your environment, like a physical thing like that, or a relationship chaos, it's challenging.
Yes, because your nervous system is going to stay activated. Our brain and our bodies always want to keep us safe.
Yes.
So
they're comfortable in that state too.
And they're comfortable in that state, but they're anticipating, right? So they're always anticipating because they have a history. They have a little vault of memories. And if anything feels like that memory, the body's naturally going to respond that way. Yeah. So it's really getting to understand our own narrative, understanding our stories behind situations. Yeah. When we're doing that. But it is hard, when I say it's hard to heal in that environment, right? It's because we're still responding the same way.
Yes.
So it's very challenging. How can we shift our responses and feel safety? It's all about safety. How can we feel a little more safe? Most people, when they've experienced something like that, it's very challenging for them to go from feeling so unsafe and in fear state constantly to feel safety. There's a bridge that we have to build.
Makes sense.
And a little more safety. And we feel the safety in the body, in the nervous system. There's several things you can probably find online and different things. But one of the things that I tell people all the time, it's called I think it's a butterfly hug. And you literally just cross your arms and tap your collarbones. And just, you don't even worry about your breath right now. But if you do that for a little bit, most likely your body will start breathing on its own.
Oh, that's neat. And you're tapping into that lymph system a little bit too with the collarbone.
But it's gentle. That helps, right? So there's different ones for the nervous system. And like I said, they're all over, I trust them all on TikTok and all that. But you can find valued ones. But that one is one of them. The other one is, I know I teach some of the emotional freedom technique, but another one is just tapping on your head right here, right? Making sure that you cover both the sides, right or left, and just take a couple of easy breaths as you're tapping. And your body sometimes naturally just does a nice exhale, and then you tap your heart, and then you can tap your gut. This is from an energy modality called body talk. But, when we start to tap, it's almost that we're giving our brain a signal of safety. Yeah. And that helps regulate that. So some of those things. So we'll get back to your question, but I think it's the posture, the breathing, the behavior. Those are the things that we shift. The other thing that I want to there's a great book called How Emotions Are Made by Dr. Lisa Barrett. I know she has a third name. I usually have it on my desk, but I don't. But it's How Emotions Are Made. Great book. But she talks about the body budget. Like we need to make sure that we've had our protein, that we've had our movement, doesn't have to be exercise, but movement of the body, that we have to have our sleep. We have to have the basics that we're nurturing in order to navigate the stresses in our lives, because we're going to overreact if we're dehydrated, if we're hungry, if we're if we're sleep
Our
deprived.
needs aren't being met.
Right. We're going to overreact to situations, and our nervous system is going to be heightened. She calls it the body budget, that we really need to look at those factors.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've referenced it as kind of your stress resilience bucket. Build or don't let it get empty or down. But yeah, I love that.
Yeah. It's like, I've seen the bucket ones, you put the water in and it's coming out the bottom of the holes because they're
and so we're spilling over the top.
Yes.
What I explain to people with symptoms and things.
Yes.
Like that.
Oh yeah. I've done that with the water, with the glass of water. I'm saying, we're putting all there, and where does it go? It goes.
Yes.
It just overflows. Yeah. But it's those, and they sound simple, but you said it before too. We have to consciously do it because it's not simple. Even though they sound simple, it's not always easy to do.
Right.
And so it's starting small. I always say under promise and over deliver. If you want to make a bunch of changes in your world, that's great. But start with the one that
I love that. Over promise and under deliver.
Yeah. Because, I've had people say, yes, I'm going to work out 5 days a week.
I know.
Or I'm going to eat healthy, or I'm going to, do these breathing, sessions, and I'm going to do it 4 times a day. I know I can, and I'm like, okay. So 4 times a day, how realistic is that on 1 to 10?
Right.
And they'll say, well, maybe a 6. I'm like, okay, thank you for being honest. And then what is the obstacles in our way? Because I think when we can look at what obstacles might prevent us from breathing several times a day, or really understanding, then we start to get a clearer picture of what we're capable of doing. And whether it's whatever changes you want to make.
Yeah. I have one more question that I thought of, and then we can wrap up, which I don't want to, but we must, I guess. So going back to massage or any kind of, I've had like lymphatic work done as well. And I remember the person saying it, like, let me know if anything comes up or comes out, because it can actually release emotions or stress or release something. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on?
Sure. Yeah.
There?
So our body's, like I said, it's fascinating. Or, there's a book, and most people might not be familiar, but there's a book called The Body Keeps Score.
Yes.
Okay. So I always recommend that, especially if somebody said, some trauma.
So good.
It's a great book. And so what happens is our body does keep score. So we have muscle memory, and we also have what they call fascia and lymph. And so the fascia, this is a little gross to say it, but someone said, you have a raw piece of chicken, and it's that white, the thin white, that's the fascia, right?
Yeah.
But for us, what happens, our fascia gets all knotted up.
Yes.
Because what happens, our emotions get stored in our body.
And
they get
literally
stored. They get stored. They get stored in our organs. They get stored and they get processed. And they don't just get stored, but they get processed. So we process emotions through our body. So like you process grief through your lungs. You can, there's different types of emotions. You can, Chinese medicine does a lot with all of that. But when you get back, so when you're doing a massage or lymphatic drainage, what you're doing is you're moving some of that stored energy.
Yeah.
And when the body's ready, it will release it.
And it has to feel safe, though.
It has to feel safe. Yes. And it has to be done slowly. People can push it. That's why I'm always cautious about doing, even with breath work, even just simple, when I said before, inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8, that can really cause someone to get into a panic attack. It's not that they're going to die, but they will feel panic and they will feel, because their body's not feeling safe. So when people get familiar with their breathing, I just want them to understand their breathing and get familiar with the inhale, the exhale, how they breathe in different situations. And then we can go into changing it. But the awareness is important. And so the same with emotions. They can get released too quickly. We feel like we have the flu. We feel like we've been beaten up. I don't know if I've heard people say, I've had a session. I was in bed for 2 days. Emotionally, I was drained.
It's true. I haven't experienced it, but yeah.
So there is something if you have a deeper trauma or complex traumas, you can experience that. But that's not bad or good. It's just that you just should know that that's the body's response to releasing. And yes, so I've had people, I do another emotional tapping work, and it's very gentle, but it's you release these emotions. So the lymphatic drainage, I'm a big proponent of lymphatic drainage for everybody. And if you can, there's a trampoline called the rebounder.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's a gentle on your muscles. You can do that. You can hold this, that, or just getting on your toes, like moving forward
and then dropping down.
Yes. And just doing.
Good for bone density too.
Good for bone density. And the other thing is, I will say just a little bit of tidbit is for women. I'm so glad in the last 5+ years, we've been getting away from the underwire, but the underwire affects the lymphatic drainage.
Oh, yeah.
So if you wear a bra with, if you have to wear underwire or you're not giving up your underwire, that's fine. But make sure at night you rub underneath that and rub to the sides of it, because you want it pumped. There's certain ways to do lymphatic drainage. There is a procedure, so you could probably, anybody can look that up. But it's always, brushing towards your heart. If people, dry brushing is another one that's really great for people. It gets the blood flow going. It gets that. I recommend that for people.
And it does help and work. Like there's no immediate, not response, but whatever you get out of it, you don't like see it immediately or anything, but it really is helping move things along in the body.
It is. And the lymphatic drainage carries out the junk in our body. I mean, that's what it does.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest drainage pathways that we have, along with our colon and others. And our brain has a lymphatic drainage system. And at night, it cleanses. That's why sleeping is so important, because it cleans out the junk in our brain. Yeah. And one thing that you said, when the emotions coming out, or if we've had trauma and you can almost feel like you have the flu, same with if you're detoxing the body from actual physical toxins, you can, and those are moving through your body, you can feel the same way.
You can feel the same way. And we have a tendency of looking at that something is wrong.
Right.
We have to really know our bodies and where we are and what we're doing at that time, right? When you're doing detoxing, that could be one of those things that happen as the body's starting to eliminate all the toxins. When you're doing the massage, that's something that the body is doing. Years ago, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but one of the neuropsychologists that I had studied under for a little bit, he used to say, you're not a brain on a stick, you have a body, and that body is connected. And so I used to have these little popsicle sticks with like the brains on them to get that. And I think we're getting there now, where we're understanding that, the big push for nervous system regulation and vagus nerve and all that. And all of that's great. I will just say to people who are watching, there's some people out there that push some techniques, and that they're valid techniques, but they might not apply them in the sequence or the process. So if you're going to watch somebody that's going, make sure that they have, it's not just their personal experience, but they have the scientific background and the training that does some of that too. That is really important because of the effects on our bodies. And you want to make sure that they can follow up and understand what's going on when you start to, release some of the stuff that's in our bodies. But I always say our brains and our bodies are they're miracles. And if we work with it instead of against it,
it's for us. It wants to do all the right things and be well.
Exactly. And we just have to give it the right resources.
Yeah. 100%. Well, first, is there anything else that you want to leave us with? Any thoughts or anything that we didn't cover? And then also let us know where everybody can find you, and all the things that you say about where we can find you will be in the show notes.
Perfect.
As well.
One of the things I want people to feel empowered. I don't want them to feel overwhelmed. I want them to know that once they start a journey of self-exploration, whether it's their healing journey or breathing, whatever that is for them, that they are in control. I want them to feel that groundedness and feel that confidence in themselves and that support that they need. And the people around them sometimes will shoot holes in some of their, what they're doing, and find a good support system, around. I think we all need to have a community of people that we trust, that we feel safe in.
Yeah.
And, really, when we're taking the dive of explore with curiosity, see how you could truly open up, that curious gene that we all have. Because when we come from things through fear, we shut down. When we come through ways of curiosity, our brain operates differently and we can see things differently. When we're in a stressed state, we get very tunnel vision. We can't see the whole picture. We stay in that problem-solving mode and not in the curiosity of opening up of what possibilities are there.
Interesting to put it in that way. Yes, yes.
And I want people to know there's possibilities.
Yeah.
That, that there are possibilities out there and so many resources out there, not to get overwhelmed by too many either.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, I have my website, eileenmcdonald.com. And I'm not as active on Instagram and Facebook, but I am going to have some videos and stuff I'll put up there. And I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So you can find me in any of those places.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time. This was so much fun. I could pick your brain for hours.
I appreciate spending time with you. And if anybody has any questions, always feel free to shoot me an email. And I always love to further conversations.
I'm sure that they will reach out. You are a wealth of knowledge and resources and all the things. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Chronic Conversations. I hope you're walking away with a little more clarity, hope, and inspiration for your healing journey. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd love for you to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs it. Every share helps this show reach more women who deserve to feel seen, heard, validated, and supported. And if we're not connected yet, come say hi on Instagram. You'll find me at Reclaimable, RECLAIM.able, ABLE. Plus, you can check out free tools and resources anytime for your wellness journey at Reclaimable, RECLAIM-able.com. And until next time, take care, and here's to thriving well, no matter where you are on your journey.